I'm glad we did that melody. Coming close to September 11th is always challenging. And I know that there's a lot of folks that feel really distant from it, but I never do. It's a nice intimate group. I'd like to come closer, but I know we have friends that are also watching online, so it was too hot outside, they were schwitzing, so they're still through the camera. So I'm going to stay here, you'll forgive me. But on this 20th year, I can't believe it. Like a lot of people were thinking, where were we? What were you doing? Who were you with? I remember exactly. I was about to start teaching a class an hour outside of Manhattan in Bridgeport, because I was ordained 10 minutes before this. And my first congregation was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And we turned on a TV in the synagogue and realized what was going on. And strangely enough, my class was to talk about living wills. So we all know about wills, but a living will is kind of the message you leave behind for loved ones. What are the truths? What are the things that are most important, more than any ring or bond? Mostly. And we couldn't go on. We were just watching the news. And then, of course, there's the debate. Rabbis, what are you going to preach about? Are you going to change your sermon? There was a New York Times article about rabbis who changed their sermons at the last minute, as if that was newsworthy. Of course we did. How do you move forward in the world? Talking about Jewish survival, anti-Semitism, we had to talk about pain and wounds. I found the sermon that I gave that Rosh Hashanah, September 18th, 2001. It says on the top of the paper. And what I talked about, well, I didn't really talk about much of anything. I shared a psalm, the psalm that some of you might have picked up as you had entered into our tent. The psalm is from Psalm 77. And Psalm 77 is one of these special 10 psalms that a Hasidic rabbi, his name is Reb Nachman of Bratslav, we quote him a lot because he was somebody who also lived with a lot of emotional pain and hardship and even despair. But he says that these 10 psalms would help somebody find tikkun. In fact, all 10 were tikkun klali, a complete remedy, he called it. All you had to do is read these 10 psalms over and over and over again, and you would find healing. I don't think it works exactly like that. But I so value what he was trying to say, that these psalms can help us toward wholeness. And Psalm 77, it marks a turning point in these 10 psalms because they kind of have a crescendo almost. They begin with an expression of anguish, abandonment, pain, even persecution, bitter exile. We can translate exile into estrangement, separation from love. And then they start moving in towards this idea of God as an ever-present presence, compassionate, despite whatever else might be going on. So I'm going to read this text with you, but being a true New Yorker, I'm going to keep interrupting myself. And you'll see the text and a little commentary, and I'm going to go back and forth. So if you start with we'll start at the beginning. It's about, to the chief musician, the Song of Asaph, so it's appropriate that our friends are here leading us musically today. And it says, I lift my voice to God and cry out. I lift my voice to God so that God may hear me. I guess the text I prepared is before I started being more consistent with not using he so much, but it's okay. You'll follow along. I lift my voice to God and cry out. There was a lot of people that cry out for lots of different things. Back then it was this terrifying idea of an act of terrorism, and who we knew and who went to work and who got up late or who stopped for coffee and survived. There was a lot of people, when they're terrified, they lift up their voices to God, and it could be in anguish, it could be in desperation, and there's an appeal that we make. Verse 3, on the day of my suffering, I seek out Adonai at night. My hand reaches out without ceasing. I refuse to be comforted. I think there's a lot of us that struggle with a connection to God. For some of us, we never really seen how do you do that. So it's just like this up in the air, up in the sky kind of an idea. We go to houses of worship. Maybe we find someone extending a hand, and maybe we'll find somebody else actually waiting to be embraced. All the harder to do in the midst of COVID. Verse 4, I remember God and I moan. When I talk, my spirit faints. Selah. I think the poet is asking, where are you? I remember you, and I moan because I'm tired and I'm overwhelmed, and I speak to you, and I'm not so sure that you're always responding so clearly to me. So it makes me feel a little bit weaker. Verse 5. Oh, look, my handout has all the wrong numbers. I'm sorry. Hold your finger where I stop and you'll catch up. You grip my lids of my eyes, and I am upset. I cannot speak. I recall former days, ancient years, long past. So even though you've been with me in the past, today I have a crisis. Today I'm feeling hurt. In the past I found strength and comfort in you. And those were happier days. The text, at night I hum my lament. I delve into my heart, my spirit searches and seeks. At night time, most of us stop working. And we're tired. And we let down our guards, and so our minds are drawn to whatever the crisis is. You can't help it, really. We reflect on life and the world in which we live. Will Adonai cast me off forever? Will God not show favor to me once again? Has God's faithfulness disappeared once and for all? Has God's word come to an end for all the generations? Has God forgotten how to show pity? Or in anger shut out God's compassion? Selah. When you see Selah in the Psalms, it's kind of like a cry. It's a word of just exclamation. We don't really have something like that so clearly in English. The way I read this is, the writer says, I just don't understand. I don't understand. Where are you? Just like other people have asked, where were you at Auschwitz? Where were you during the pogroms, the persecutions, the bloodlettings, September 11th? And I think that there's a real fear that the writer of this psalm is feeling that God isn't real sometimes. Why aren't you doing anything? And I think that's something that all of us ask at some point, and it comes from deep inside. Back to the psalm, I said, it is my failing that my right hand of the Most High is shifted. How many of us have said, what have I been doing wrong? Where have I done something wrong? How have I doubted my faith? How easy it is to say that I'm being punished for something, or at least to wonder if that's the possibility. I say we're not. I don't believe that that's how God works. Waiting to punish? No. Let's look at the text. I remember the deeds of God. I remember your wonders from days long ago. I meditate on all your work, your actions. I speak of your deeds. God, holiness is your way. What power is as great as God? You're the God who does wonders. You have let all the nations know of your strength. You redeemed your people with an outstretched hand, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Selah. The waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and were terrified. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunderclaps. Your arrows flashed lightning continually. The sound of your thunder whirled out like a chariot wheel. Bolts of lightning illumined the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your way was in the sea. Your path was in the great water. Your footsteps were invisible, but you led your people as a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Yeah, God carried us and supported us and strengthened us. And God's footsteps aren't visible, still not. We follow a God that we can't see, and sometimes that can be frustrating. We want a quick and easy answer. But I believe that being in this relationship of ours, having a sense of the holy, believing that God can be real, it's more than just getting test results or having an answer to the prayer the way we want it. I think it really is, we can get through this. We can cross the river. We can reach Sinai. We can journey forward. We can blame God for all of the hard stuff, and that's okay, because I think God can take it. I do. I think God can take it. But I do believe that God has given us such an amazing wellspring of resources, if only we can tap into it. I remember at the time thinking about what Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson would teach, that 9/11 was the hand of God, and I was so appalled, disgusted. This would be a punishment? Innocent people dying that way? I think God was in New York, and God was in Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania. I think God is present at every place where God is needed, sitting right next to us and crying along with us. That's where God was, weeping right next to us, looking at what God's children had done to one another. I chose to teach the psalm on that day because I think it was natural for people to doubt and be angry. And I also remember the kids in front of the elementary school that week going up to cars and having collections to try and help people. I remember those lemonade stands. I remember the story of a woman running in her heels away from the towers, and somebody from a shoe store was giving out sneakers to all of these women who wore their work shoes out, telling them, "You'll go further with these." A kind gesture. People putting up strangers in their homes because we were all stuck. You couldn't get out of Manhattan unless you walked across the bridge. Cell phones weren't working, but there were people and their kindness that were taking care of one another. In the book of Nehemiah, it says, "Come, let us build," when he returned from the exile of Babylonia. Come, let us build. We had to create facts on the ground and rebuild hope and love and lives. So during these days of awe, during Shabbat Shuvah, which is now a time of turning and considering, I'm going to ask us, when we hear the shofar next, let it be the blast to help us tremble just a little bit so that we can know our place in the building of renewal and the rebuilding of hope, of recreation, and of overcoming with God's help.